I know you guys are probably a little wet. Sorry about that. It's Alberto's fault. Talk to him about that. So hopefully you're in the right place. This is 3D Foundations. We are going to be learning all kinds of really fun stuff in here. Pretty much what you came to school here for, you're in the very first class for that. I am a Lego guy. This is all smoke and mirrors. I go home and I take this mask off, and I look exactly like the Lego guy. But what I was going to say is, welcome to 3D Foundations. You are finally on your career path, so good for you guys. But be aware, this is a bit of a double-edged sword. Yay, it's lots of fun. Yay, we're finally doing what we came here for. But here's also the first class that's really going to straighten you out. Does that make sense? Please do not take whatever you've done in previous classes and think that that's the template, because that doesn't even exist anymore. Just erase it at this point. Now we are in big boy and big girl school, right? So now we're playing for keeps. So again, don't do what worked in other classes. Learn from this one, because this class is a microcosm of the rest of your career here at Full Sail. So you really got to dial in, and now it really counts. Does that make sense? Okay, and the reason I say that is because the previous classes, you know, they have their curriculums and their material they've got to go through, but it's kind of like high school 2.0. It's really not all that challenging. That stops right here. Like the minute you walk in this door, we are playing for keeps now, and you've got to go after this like your career depends on it, because it does. Does that make sense? Okay, so like I said, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to cover a lot of material in a very short period of time, but that's what accelerated means when we talk about the education process. So what I do is I have my lectures structured so that I can get all the information in that I need to in a given class time. So what I'll do is I will go through the material, and periodically I'll stop and I'll say, hey, is there any questions about what we've talked about so far? That way we kind of streamline our questions and we get through everything we need to. At the end, if I haven't touched on what you need answered, then we'll do those things. Does that make sense? Because unfortunately, in terms of time, I can't do tangents too much or we won't get through everything. And we definitely have a pretty hefty schedule, and I want to make sure we get as much interactive time as possible, because that's going to make a huge difference for you in terms of your level of success. So, you know, like I said, other classes, a little bit easier to kind of ease into. Yeah, right from day one, we bring the hammer. So be ready, because this is the way it's going to be every day. Does that make sense? Okay, get a hell yeah? Get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. There we go. That's not a bad hell yeah for the first day. Not bad. I think that's one of our better ones. I put that in the top 5. Awesome. Online. That's all right. If you want to sit down, you can. And again, the only reason I tell you this is because typically what happens is you come in here under the assumption that this class is going to be like everything else you've done here so far, and you get caught off guard. And I don't want that to happen. I want you to be successful right from go. So I'm helping you to avoid common pitfalls. Does that make sense? You're smart enough to figure this out. That's not a big deal. But I don't want you to make those mistakes and learn from them. I want you to learn from the errors of people who've taken this class previously and now know how to do it right. Does that make sense? So I'm just saving you the time and the trouble. So trust me on these things. I've actually taught this class for 10 years, 10 or 11 years. I know what works and what doesn't. So if you trust me and you do what Brian and I suggest you to do, you're going to do terrific. If you kind of go off and do your own thing, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's not good. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. So let's get into the material. I know you guys are excited to get started. We have a ton to talk about. We always do. But I want to make sure we touch on this important stuff first. And like I said, we will stop periodically for air, and then we can answer those questions. And I know you got a ton of them. Probably one of the things you want to know right away is, who the heck am I working with, right? Who am I working with on this journey through 3D Foundations? One of the people you'll be working with, we have sort of 2 sets of instructors. We have the lecture instructors, which are Brian and myself, but we also have a lab environment where we have teachers in a more of a hands-on one-on-one environment. That's Brian. And
Steve.
that's me. I'm the other
Most
one.
awesomeness here.
And,
Yes.
thank you.
Some of it rubs off on me.
No.
Semi off.
No, you're terrific, Brian. But we have, again, sort of two different kinds of instructors. We have the lecture instructors, and this is what you're getting in here, the lecture. We do have things that we'll be doing in the lecture environment as well, active participation in the material we're trying to learn, so that's good. But when we get to the lab environment, for those of you who are in my local class, you'll be working with the instructors who are specifically allocated to the lab. And they're just as talented, just as excited and fun to work with as Brian and myself. That's just their area that they have been assigned to. Does that make sense? Okay, so one of the instructors in there, his name is Marcus. And when this class started, I asked everybody to make a little Lego person of themselves. So this is what Marcus thinks he looks like as a Lego person. And I asked him to just give a little bit of personal information. And 3D Foundations? Nope, nope. Very popular mistake, though. A couple of people have asked me that. I don't think this pop culture class must be exciting. But anyway, in terms of the instructors, this is what Marcus thinks he looks like. And of course, feel free to ask him about any of the things that he is interested in. But something I want to point out to you right away, do you guys see that areas of specialty? Okay, areas of specialty. These are disciplines that he has skill sets in and enjoys and likes to do. Now, in terms of the skill sets, what we're talking about is different career opportunities within the CG production pipeline. How many of you guys have heard of the CG production pipeline before? Okay, a couple of you, that's good. And incidentally, in case you don't, no big deal. I teach this class like you don't know anything, so I explain everything very thoroughly. So don't be afraid if you don't know what something is. And if I don't hit it, ask me and I will explain it more or different or whatever it takes for you to understand. But in terms of the CG production pipeline, it's just kind of like an automotive assembly line. At one end, you have a frame, an empty frame of a car, and at the other end, you have a car you can drive. And what happens is that frame moves through the factory and it stops at a series of stations. And each station is manned by a person who does one job. They do it really well and they do it really quickly. Does that make sense? Like my job is to install doors. So the frame comes to me, I put a door on. Frame moves on. Next frame comes in, I put a door on. I do that all day long. I'm good at it and I'm very fast. Does that make sense? CG is the same. We've got an idea at one end, storyboards, a script, and at the other end, we have a video game we can play or a movie we can watch. And along the way, there's a series of stops, different disciplines. These are different jobs within the CG world. Does that make sense? Okay, and they all feed off of each other. They're all interconnected and interdependent. So in terms of the things that Marcus is interested in, modeling, which is very early in the production pipeline. That's what we're going to be doing in here is modeling. We also are going to get into some texturing, a little bit of lighting and rendering, and those are towards the other end of the CG production pipeline prior to going to something like compositing. But these are all things that we all do in here. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay, and there's a bunch of different kind of jobs, and they are broken up fairly evenly amongst the different kinds of classes. So in each class, you'll get an opportunity to be exposed to these different disciplines in varying levels to help you kind of figure out what it is you'd like to do, because everybody's different and everybody has different interests and skills. And through the courses of going through Full Sail, you're going to figure out where it is you fit in, what it is you like, or what it is you have aptitude for. Kind of like when you put together a team or you put together a band, you know, certain personalities are drawn to certain instruments or certain positions on the field. And what we're trying to do is figure out what works for you. What's your job? Make sense? Hell yeah? Hell yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. So also in the lab, you will see Sarah. That's right. We have a girl too. Yay. And that's what, yes, yay. And that's what Sarah thinks she looks like as a Lego person. Obviously, she's very big into cats, so feel free to ask her about her cat. She'll talk your ear off. But you'll see that her disciplines that she's interested in, she's got animation, rigging, and modeling. Animation, obviously, bringing things to life. The rigging process is where we actually build the machine or the skeleton that enables us to make geometry animatable. So that's a good combination there. And again, obviously, modeling, because we are a modeling class. So there's a lot of things you can talk to her about as well in terms of things you might be interested in. All right. And then you would probably pick out me on the slide. That is me when I'm at home. I look just like that. And in terms of the CG production pipeline, I think it's all pretty cool, to be honest with you. I really enjoy just about every facet of it. And what I would recommend very highly is, even if you're in a class that is centered around a discipline you're not really interested in, I would still pay very close attention and try to learn that material, because the more information you have, the more valuable you are as a potential employee. Does that make sense? Knowledge is power, absolutely. So if they're trying to weigh two candidates against each other, well, this one can do this, this, and this one only can do this and that, that's just one easy way to eliminate someone. Does that make sense? So always take any class you're in very seriously. Try to learn and understand it to a level of where you're competent at it. You don't have to be the best ever, but competent. Yes, Brian?
I'd like to know what air chair is.
What air chair is? Oh, okay. Air chair. It's kind of a crazy concept. I don't know who figured it out, but what they do is, if you've ever been water skiing, they take a water ski and they attach a huge pole to it. And the pole is, about 4 to 6 feet high, and they mount a chair on top of that. And then what you do is you actually sit in the chair and you put a little seatbelt on and you get pulled behind a boat. And what happens is you kind of steer with your head and with your arms. So if you look, you actually start going that way. And if you raise your the tow rope up, you actually go down somewhat in the water. And if you pull that tow rope down, it launches you like a catapult. So feel free to look up air chairing on YouTube. Not now, but look that up later. It's pretty funny to see people flying around. Anyway, it's lots of fun, and I recommend it highly if you don't mind crashing, because that's what I mostly do. I'm going for height. All right. Probably the next thing you're wondering is, what are we doing this month? What are we going to do over the span of a month? We are going to be building assets or objects from the world around us. Much like when you're first learning how to draw, we start with still life, right? We have to learn how to own and understand reality before we can make plausible fantasy. So what we're going to do is learn to create objects from the everyday world around us. And then ultimately what we're going to do is take all of those objects and put them into a final scene, and we're going to make a still life of the things you've made. And we're going to render it out and make an image, which you can actually print out and put on your refrigerator, put on a web page, anything like that, and show everybody what you accomplished in just the very first week of computer animation class. So you'll have some really cool stuff to show off right from go. Now, in terms of the objects we're building, we've actually separated them into different levels. We have level 1, which is your minion level objects, more simple. Then we have our level 2, our boss level objects. And then we have our level 3 objects, which are Supreme Poly Commander, obviously more complicated and more work on your part in order to create the project files and actually build these things. But we move through a progression, and this will allow you to sharpen your skills, literally and figuratively. And then ultimately, when you get to your level 3, you will be able to make your own Lego person, which is very cool. We had a student a couple of months ago who, as soon as all of his friends back home found out he was going to be making a Lego person, everybody wanted a Lego person. So he had to make a bunch of them. And of course, you got to have cool accessories if you're going to have Lego people, because that's what makes them cool. So minifigs rule. All right. Now, in terms of the objects you're going to be building, how are you going to be graded, right? Because some of you are brand new. Some of you have some 3D experience. Some of you have used other 3D applications. The good news is 3D is 3D. It really doesn't matter what application you use. They all have different names for the tools, and the interface is all different, but they do more or less the same thing. If there was one application that was absolutely fabulous and the rest were awful, they would just all go away. So you know they're fairly similar. Does that make sense? Okay. So in terms of what we're going to be learning, we're going to be learning Maya, and we will be working with Maya. You must use it. In terms of the film industry, it's virtually an industry standard. If you are working on a movie, you're going to be using Maya. So you got to learn how to use it. It is the application we teach at this entire school, so you're going to have to get into that. We do have ZBrush as well, and we also delve into some Houdini, I think, also, which is awesome, and some really cool compositing softwares like Nuke, which you're going to enjoy. But point being, must use the stuff we're teaching. You can't lean on what you already know or think you know, because it may not necessarily be industry standard. Does that make sense? Okay. So how am I going to be graded? Well, we've broken everything up into three major categories. We have the artistic criteria. That's 34% of your grade. Artistic criteria is pretty much, does it look right? When you look at it, you say, well, here's the real object. Here's the one that I built. How closely do they match? Are they the same? Because that's the goal. We're basically 3D printing machines. You give me a 2D image and I make it in 3D. Does that make sense? So artistic criteria, 34%. So that means if you build the most beautiful model I have ever seen in my life, that is the best pepper shaker I have ever seen, you only get a 34. Can you pass with a 34? No, you cannot. 34 is not a passing grade. So we have other criteria, technical criteria and organizational criteria. And what this does for you is it doesn't penalize people who are new to this. Does that make sense? If everything was on how good it looks, if you're new to this, that could be a steep hill for you to climb. However, there are other very, very equally important foundational skills in terms of the industry's expectations of what you're supposed to be doing without even having to be told. Those are also part of the grading. Does that make sense? So you have opportunity, whether you have a little experience or zero experience, you can still get a good grade in this class. But what it will all hinge on is putting enough time into your work. You will never see such a close correlation to how much time you put into your work and how well you understand and can execute as this class. So how much time do I put into my work and how well do I follow instructions? Also very, very important. You might think that that's not a big deal. It is colossally important. If you're not following the instructions of your employers, it's the same as if you're not doing the work. Does that make sense? When you make art for yourself, you make it any way you want. Make it beautiful. When you're happy, you're done. Where art and business collide, business wins because they're writing the checks. You have to do exactly what they asked for, the way they asked for it, and it's got to be done by when they asked for it to be done. Does that make sense? So the thought of, oh, I'm an artist, I'll just kick back, I'll show up when I feel like it, and I'll do what I want. Yeah, no. That's not at all how it works. Does that make sense? Okay, and I don't, probably not many people will tell you that. So I'm letting you know right from go. That is the animal you are about to face. Make sense? Hell yeah? Hell yeah. Awesome, good, good. All right, so again, we've got these other two major criteria. Make sure you hit those as well. Just because it looks right doesn't mean you're done. So, and this is really instructions. Follow the instructions. You're gonna be okay. All right. Any questions about what we talked about so far? What I'm going to be building, who I'm going to be working with? No? Okay, don't be shy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about class structure. I alluded to this a little bit early. The idea that we actually have two environments. We have the lecture environment and we have the lab environment. The lecture environment is where you are right now, and where you are right now taking part in the lecture environment, my digital friends. So what's going on here is when we are in this classroom, we are talking about skills, we're talking about tools, we're talking about techniques, all this really important stuff for how you're going to do your job, because this is where the information comes from. And in terms of the lecture, what's the best thing that you can do in here? Take great notes. Ask great questions. Pay attention. Does that make sense? Very, very important. Some of the material I cover, I only talk about one time. You're still responsible for it. Does that make sense? So you got to make sure you're writing stuff down. I will cover a lot of material in one day. It's mind-boggling how much we will talk, and you've got to know how to do this stuff. Any of you guys cook at all? Any of you guys? Okay, awesome. Yeah, me too. Who can afford to eat out? Anyway, in terms of cooking, what's cool about cooking is you can kind of just follow the directions, and make the food. I need a cup of this. I need a pinch of that. 3 fluid ounces of this. You stick it together. Typically, it doesn't look like the picture when you're done, right? Very seldom. But you do have something you can eat, and it probably tastes, fair at least, right? Depending on your skill set in the cooking realm. But in terms of the process, you still have something you can eat. The problem with 3D is there's a lot of steps, and they are all extremely specific, and you really can't, there's no freelancing. You don't kind of, well, I don't have any sugar. How about salt? You know, you can't change items. You have to do it exactly right. You have to follow the instructions. And unfortunately, if you do one thing incorrectly, if you have one setting, one ingredient, it's not right, it just disappears and you have nothing. Does that make sense? So it's not really it was pretty close. It's not that kind of thing. You really have to have the instructions and you've got to have them down. Does that make sense? Okay, so we go through this stuff together. So it's not as if the information's not out there, but if you're not dialed in with me every day, you're going to struggle with your assignments. And I know the problem is typically in classes in the past, if you miss information in the classroom because you're just not feeling it that day, or whatever, the teacher's a jerk, you could always go home and Google the information and get it. It was pretty easy to access it when you felt like it was time to access it. What I'm teaching you in here, you're not going to hear anywhere else. It does not exist. Does that make sense? Very few people teach foundational 3D. So the problem is you can't look this up elsewhere. I'm really the only source you've got. So you've got to take advantage of the time in here with me. Does that make sense? You can't look it up later. It's just not there. Now, the good news is these lectures are recorded. So if you need to watch a lecture again to get the information, please do so. We post it where you can get at it. No big deal. But know this, if you're watching the recorded lecture, you're going to have to watch the entire thing again. And if you're watching a video lecture, and this is for my digital friends as well as my local ones, I recommend very highly you take notes while you're watching it. Because the problem is, it's really hard when you're looking for information to just kind of skim through. Play, is that it? No, okay, here, or play. No, what was that? I don't know, back it up. Play, no, that's not it. Maybe it was at the beginning. It's a nightmare. Does that make sense? Because it's not structured. So it's kind of hard to jump around and find stuff. In addition to which, the other mistake that people typically make when they're following a video is they'll do play, stop, and then do it. Okay, play, stop, and then do it. And the problem is you don't retain anything that way. Does that make sense? All you're doing is executing, and you're not actually learning. You don't know, yeah, I've got a thing at the end when I'm all done, but I have no idea how I did that now, and I can't do it again. Does that make sense? So critical, taking the notes. I cannot push that enough. And I don't know whether it's people who typically take notes do really well, or smart people take notes, or people who want to do well take. I'm not sure what, it's a chicken and the egg argument. But I have noticed that the more notes people take, the better they do, regardless of their background, what they came in here with. Does that make sense? You jot it down. The reason being, if you listen to me, you're only renting the information. If you write it down, you own it. Does that make sense? You want to own this information. Don't borrow it from me, own it. Make sense? Okay, and thank you for the lightning. That was good. All right. So, exactly. The thunder at his beck and call. No, not at all. Now, the good news is, in terms of the lecture environment, it's not all just talking, which is terrific, because we actually have little mini activities that we do together, and that's how we can make sure you understand what we're talking about. So what will happen is, I'll explain something to you. This is how this works. This is how we do it, da-da-da-da-da. You will write it down and ask questions then if you don't understand it, and then we will do a little in-class activity together. If you can do the activity, you understand what we just talked about. Does that make sense? If we get to the activity and you look at me and you go, what do I do first? You are approaching your education all wrong. Does that make sense? That should not happen, because we just talked about what to do. You should be able to do that. Make sense? Okay, so information, activity, information, activity. Those are all our in-class activities. For my digital friends, you have those activities as well, so you can do them also. And there's several for each lecture. At the end of each lecture, we have something called a skill check. And the skill check is basically, are you able to reproduce what you did today in lecture? So we have a little assignment for you to do. I just give you some advice and suggestions on how to do it. I turn you loose and you have to do it. And this skill check is basically a culmination of everything we talked about on any given lecture. So if you can do it, you're doing well. If you can't do it, you need to seek help, and seek help immediately. Does that make sense? Okay, so the skill check is kind of how we see how you're doing, and it helps you to see how you're doing Because if you can do the skill checks, you're doing terrific. You don't even have to ask. If you're having trouble with the skill checks, you need to start talking to people because you're falling behind. And it's kind of like a snowball. It'll get away from you if you let it. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, great. So we got skill checks. So there's 3 of those a week. And incidentally, each one of those skill checks are worth 1%, which means if you do all 10 skill checks, because you don't have to if you don't want to, ill-advised. But if you didn't want to do them, you didn't have to. But they are worth 1% each. And what that means is if you do all 10, you're actually raising your final grade by 1 letter. So if you were getting a B in this class and you do all those skill checks, you just got an A. Does that make sense? So as if the skill check has not got enough incentive, I would recommend it highly. It makes a big difference because the skill checks are not brutally difficult. It's an easy way to accumulate points. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, great. So after the skill checks, we've got 3 skill checks a week. Then we have what we call our weekly turn-in. And the weekly turn-in, that's the major assignment. That's where we're going to be building the assets, the pepper shakers, the screwdrivers, all that stuff that we're building. And the weekly turn-in is basically a culmination of all your skill checks. So if you can do the in-class activities, you understand the information. If you can do the skill check, you own that day's information. And if you've done all of your skill checks, you can do your weekly turn-in with little or no difficulty. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's sort of the progression of how those things build. The one thing that is very difficult to sort of nail down is time. That is the one thing that I can't even really begin to explain. It takes a lot of time to do this work. That's the bottom line. Everything takes forever. Anything that looks good takes a long time to do. There's no, yeah, I pressed 3 buttons and it was done. That just doesn't happen. So what I would recommend is make sure you build enough time into your schedule to work on this work. Because if you don't give yourself enough time, you're going to struggle because this takes practice. But the good news is that's all it takes is practice, right? Anybody know how to play an instrument? Okay. How about some sports? Any sports? People who play sports? Awesome. Cool. Anything you've learned how to do in life, you practice to get better, right? You might have some natural ability, but you have to practice to get really good. This is the same. So the good news is anybody can do this. The question is, are you willing to work hard enough to do this well? Does that make sense? My personal recommendation, no matter what's going on in your life, make sure you're putting aside at least 2 hours every night outside of lab time working on this stuff at a minimum. Does that make sense? Okay, because I can't tell you how many emails I got. I don't know about you, Brian. I get a ton of emails. I've been working on this assignment for like an hour and I'm taking it's a hard time. So it's not getting done. I'm like, an hour? That's it? Are you kidding me? That's not even close to a record. So just exactly, I know. Well, but here's the thing. If this line of work was super easy and anybody could do it and I just pressed a few buttons and I'd have a dragon, right? And it didn't take a lot of work and sweat and tears and crying. If it was that simple, yeah, there would be, everybody could do this job, the pay would be terrible, and there wouldn't be any jobs available at all. Does that make sense? So thank goodness this is complicated. Thank goodness this is difficult, because this is how we separate the people who want this, like they want air, from the people who can kind of imagine, yeah, I'd like to make lots of money, be famous and awesome. Yeah, who wouldn't? Does that make sense? This is how we figure out who really wants this. And that's the people who are going to do whatever it takes to be successful. And those are the people who do terrific. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, I'm just putting that out there so you know. You would figure this out eventually anyway. I'm telling you now so you don't have to figure it out. You can trust me on it. All right, cool. So skill checks, very important. Please do those. We also have a lab environment for my local class. For my online class, my digital friends, you guys will be meeting in lab periods also. And Brian, course director Brian will be in there helping you guys out. And actually, and a bunch of other instructors also utilizing the Google Hangout. How many of you guys have ever been to a Google Hangout before? Anybody? Couple? Okay. Listen, that Google Hangout thing, I'm going to push this hard and early now. No pun intended. It's a button. You press it. But in terms of that help, it's on FSO. Literally, it's a big red button. You press it and you go to the Google Hangout. And I cannot possibly stress enough to you how important using that Google Hangout is, because what happens is we've got teachers in there almost around the clock, but there's almost always somebody there. Most of the time it's instructors though. And you guys can use that as an online platform to just talk to each other, help each other, get help and suggestions from instructors. It is so easy. It's ridiculous. And I can't believe I have to beg people to go, but it will make such a huge difference. And my suggestion to you is if you're working on Maya, sign into the Google Hangout. Even if you don't have any questions, you can just work. And if you're like, oh shoot, what was that thing? Let me look it up in my notes. Dang, I don't remember that setting. Hey, does anybody remember what that setting is? Oh yeah, 0.006. Thank you. Does that make sense? It's like having a live information superhighway right there whenever you need it. So get into that Google Hangout. I recommend it highly. Don't be shy. It's totally cool. There's nothing weird about it. And there's great people in there, not only instructors like Brian, but other people who really care about their fellow students and will help each other out. So I recommend it very highly. You do have to have Google Chrome as your browser to access it though, because they don't want you in the Google Hangout using other browsers. So you do have to download Google Chrome, but we give you links for that, and it's free. Doesn't cost you anything, so super easy to do. Oh, while I'm on that topic, have you guys been on FSO yet? Okay, everything you need is on FSO. If you've got a question, I bet you, well, I don't have any money and can't bet, but there's an excellent chance that the answer to whatever question you have is on FSO. You just got to look for it a little bit. Does that make sense? We blocked it all out for you. The whole, if you open up FSO, there's a whole bunch of activities there all set up for you. Go do those as soon as you can if you've not done so already. Do them in order and really do them. Don't just check them off and say, oh yeah, I did that. You need all of that stuff. You need to understand it. If I had my dream come true, like before you guys even got to this class, there was another class that told you how to set everything up, get it all installed and get ready to go so you could hit the ground running in here. But unfortunately, I don't have that luxury. But those activities are important. The information is there. Make sure you read it. It's kind of like we're playing a game, 3D Foundations game, right? But the rules are there. Read the rules. You wouldn't play a game without reading the rules, right? You're gonna lose that game. Exactly. They're gonna take advantage of you. Oh yeah, people whose name begin with M go last. Sorry, so you got to make sure you know what the rules are, or you will be taken advantage of. So look over FSO thoroughly. It is your best buddy. So in terms of my online friends and my local friends, you guys can use this Google Hangout for some help. If you're in my local class, we also have a scheduled lab period, and it is 6 honking hours long, where you're going to be in there with 2 instructors at the very least, maybe even more some days, who can like sit right down next to you and look over what you're doing and help you. So it's a great opportunity to get a lot of help. And you should never, ever be sitting idly in there. There's always work to do. At the very least, again, for this first day, make sure you're going through all those activities, download all those things, make sure you understand everything that's discussed in each of those activities that you have to do. And, call me crazy, but you could even look at the next lecture we're going to have, because we have lectures from previous months posted for you in an archive. So you could watch those lectures and like, oh, okay, I know what we're going to talk about when we get together on Wednesday, Friday, whatever day this is, 2 from now. So Friday, we're going to get together. It'll be lecture 2. If I've looked over lecture 2's video already, I've already got a good understanding of the terms. So now I'm comfortable with those. Now I can get right to concepts and try to understand. So it's almost like a free look at what we're going to do. Does that make sense? Okay, so there should not be anybody idle ever, because there is just way too much work to do. It's not possible. So if you've got nothing to do, you got to go, what am I missing? And you can ask an instructor and we'll tell you what you could do. Make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome, awesome. All right. Any questions about the idea of lab, skill checks, in-class activities? Anything? No? Yes?
I would just say, just say if somebody has like something that happens in between during the lab and they have to, is the attendance set like where we only have to sign in once for the lab and then we are marked in for the whole lab period?
The question is, how does lab attendance work? No, it's not one sign in. You actually will sign in more than one time. So if you're thinking you can sign into lab and then skate, nope. Yeah, just imagine the legal implications if we let you sign in and just go. Oh yeah, he's in lab. No, he's not. He's out selling waffles on the street. What? So that's what I'm talking about. Exactly. Exactly. Extra syrup. But does that make sense? We have to know where you are or we get into trouble for that. So you sell waffles on your time. All right. So quick look at this week's objective. We're going to be modeling some objects. We're going to build 3 things from the level 1 folder. And what's going to end up happening is we have this scene file for you with little pedestals in it. We already made the pedestals for you. That's all good. But what's going to happen is you're going to model the actual objects, and then you're going to bring them into that scene. You're going to import them and set them on the different pedestals, just so that you're aware of what we're going to be doing for our week 1 turn in. Does that make sense? So this is the big goal for this week, that scene file with 3 objects in it. All right. So we're going to talk about the creation of a project folder. We're going to talk about Maya's interface, obviously. We're going to delve into the importance of reference, and we're going to discuss polygon primitives, the building blocks for everything we make. The folder creation is very important because when you guys get to week 3, you have to make your own folders. Weeks 1 and 2, we made the folders for you. The image planes are already in place. We tried to make it as easy as possible. All you have to concentrate on is modeling. Week 3, you got to do the work. It's like we take the training wheels off. Does that make sense? So even though we're learning this day 1, this is something you're going to have to do week 3. Does that make sense? Okay. So here we go. Let's get into that stuff. Oh, also in terms of organization, we were talking about files in terms of part of that 35% you can earn doing things other than does it look right is file management. And file management is all about staying organized so that we move efficiently. Because without organization, we have chaos. And literally in this field, time is money. You can literally point to the dollar value it takes per hour to make a movie, to make a video game. So we've got to use our time to our best advantage. Otherwise, we are not cost effective, and that's how you are no longer employed. Does that make sense? So we got to stay on top of organization because that is part of moving efficiently and keeping the project going. All right, so let's do a little activity here. This is the activity slide, by the way. Whenever you see me jogging, Sarah lifting weights, and Marcus doing push-ups, you know that we're going to do a little activity together. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a project folder. So if you have Maya on your laptop already, you can launch it now. If you don't have Maya on your laptop, actually I don't want that one, I want that one. If you don't have Maya on your laptop, today is the one and only day you don't have to have it, so you'll be able to get away with it, but you've got to have it from here on out. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you don't have it today, you can set it up in the lab. So when you get to the lab, the instructors there will make sure you have Maya on your laptop and functional before you go, because you're going to need it. And of course, we're using 2018. And where do you think the download link is for that? Autodesk is the company that makes it. But do you think I'm going to make you go to Autodesk, or do you think I gave you a link? I gave you a link, of course. And where would that be, do you think? It's on FSO, absolutely. So make sure you're going to FSO, and there's a section called downloads, and among the billion things you got to do in there, one of them is download and install Maya 2018, and we'll show you how to do it, or Maya 2017. We're working with both. Yes?
I downloaded Maya, but I can't open it.
Okay.
It's just saying, like,
Did you get your activation code? Because it's 2 parts. Get onto FSO, not right now, because I need you to absorb information, but when you get to the lab environment, because first you download the application, but that doesn't let you open it. They have to give you a serial number, because when you try to open it, it's going to ask you for a serial number. And if you don't have it, it's not going to let you open it. Because what's happening is Autodesk is giving you guys a $7,000 application for free for 2 years because you're a student. So, you know, we are very gracious and grateful that they're doing that. But we do have to sign up for it. We create an account, and then they give us a serial number that will allow us to activate it. Does that make sense? So all the steps have to be executed or it doesn't work. All right, so make sure you're looking that over. All right, so again, if you don't have Maya right now, fine. Just take good notes and ask questions, because you're still responsible for the information, but make sure you get that in the lab. All right, so in terms of project folders, the way Maya works is, or actually the way you work, is you and Maya are working together as a team. And what happens is when we are creating 3D projects, they're very complicated. There's a lot of stuff to them. And again, in terms of the idea of organization, you are the creative side of this project that you're building, and Maya is the math side, because that's what we're doing. We're creating art with math. And in order for us to work together effectively, we have to be organized. So when you create a project in Maya, you know, whatever it is you want to build, there's actually a main folder for that project. Within that folder, there's a whole bunch of other little folders. Some of those folders you need access to because there's stuff in there you need. Some of those folders Maya needs access to because those are things that Maya cares about and you could care less. Does that make sense? So we have to create this project folder so that we know what we're working on, Maya knows what we're working on, and we can each get what we need to make that project happen. Does that make sense? Okay, so whenever you decide to build something, these would be the steps that you would go through. So these are the steps for project execution. Incidentally, anytime I go, and these are the steps for the creation of, and whatever it is I say, that's a write it down thing. Does that make sense? Because you're gonna need to jot these things down in order. All right, so creation of a project folder, all you have to do is go to your main menu item, File, and it's in the upper left-hand corner. Click on that with the left mouse button, and you get a little drop-down menu from there. If you go down here to the bottom, about the bottom sixth of it or so, you'll see there's something called Project Window. All right, and that's what we want to have access to. So we'll click again with the left mouse button. Incidentally, is Maya a mouse-driven application? Yes, very much so. You're going to want to have a 3-button mouse or use the pen that comes with your tablet when you got your tablet. Either of those are fine. You just have to set it up so that your pen is a 3-button device, but you can use either one. If you haven't used a mouse with Maya before, I would recommend doing the pen. It's a little bit better for you in terms of ergonomics. But you know, if you really love the mouse, 3-button mouse is fine. But make sure it's got 3 buttons. But any 3 buttons is fine. You know, you can buy a mouse for $8 at the grocery store, and that works just as well. All right, so here I am in the project window, and you'll see in the upper right-hand corner a section where it says New. You just got to click on that button that says New, and that will create a new project. The next step is we have to name this project, and you can name it whatever you want. I'm making a cool robot, so I call it Cool Robot. And you'll notice that I have the word cool, and then robot starts with a capital R. And that's how I indicate a second word. So you want to try to capitalize the second word. You can also, if you want to, there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting an underscore in there to separate things. That's also good. But what you want to avoid is a space. Does that make sense? Machines don't understand spaces because that's a non-character. You got to put something in there so that it knows. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is a little bit of heads up on naming. All right, so you can call it whatever you want. Once you've got the name in there, the next thing you want to do is figure out where you want this project to be created. And the project could be anywhere. It doesn't matter on your laptop where you're going to put it. So what you want to do is click on this little yellow folder. And anytime you see a little yellow folder in Maya, what that's saying is, take me to this thing, direct me to it, show me the path to get there. Does that make sense? So I'm going to click on this, and this little window opens up and it says, okay, well, where do you want this project to be created? Now, just for ease of demonstration, I'm going to choose the desktop, but typically where you guys want to work and save your files is going to be in the documents folder. Does that make sense? Think of that as your place to save stuff. But again, I'm going to just choose my desktop so you can see it right away. So I say select, and you'll notice that if you look at the path for location now, under my name, this is going to be on my desktop. Make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. So now there's a whole bunch of other really cool folders in here, and they all have these default setups. You leave those as they are, no big deal at all, right? And just hit accept. And what you'll notice is that now you have this cool folder on your desktop called whatever you want. And when you open it up, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of folders inside. And again, some of those folders even have subfolders of those. And again, all of these folders have jobs. And in terms of the folders that matter the most to you is the scenes folder. So make sure you're familiar with that. That's where the actual file is. When you're trying to launch a file, a Maya file, it will be in there. So look in scenes for that. The other thing that you'll be focused on is your source images folder. Your source images folder is where all of your reference will be. We're going to talk about reference shortly, but that's the images of the things you're trying to make. That's what you're looking at to determine what you're making. So that information will be in there. So those are the two folders that matter the most for you. And of course, there's a little workspace file in there, and that basically launches Maya's interface so that you have something to work with. All right. Now, once you've created a folder and you're ready to start working on a project, the next thing you have to do is tell Maya that that's the project you want to work on, because Maya has no idea. Maya is like working with a 3-year-old. It's ridiculous. So you have to explain everything very thoroughly to Maya, because it's a machine and it only understands yes and no. Does that make sense? So in terms of working on this project, I have to tell Maya I want to work on it, and I do that by going through a process which we call setting the project. Setting the project is critically important because it explains to Maya what you're working on. So before you begin any process, right after you launch Maya any given day, the very next thing you do is set your project. So in terms of doing that, again, it's very simple. These are the steps for setting your project. You go to your main menu item, File, and then right under Project window, you'll see Set Project. Make sense? You just click on that. And then Maya will say, okay, what do you want to work on? And you navigate to it. Is it in your documents folder? Is it on your desktop? Where is this thing that you want to set your project to? Well, in this case, it's on my desktop, so I choose desktop. I see all of my desktop related files, and then I say, oh, you know what? That's what I want to work on. And I select the outer folder of this project, because when I go into this folder, that's the main Maya folders and the workspace icon. So I know I have to set my project to that folder, the outer one. Make sense? And then all you have to do is click this icon here, Set. Now Maya knows what project I'm working on. Now if I save my files, they're going to go to this folder. If Maya's saving any other extracurricular information, it's going to go to this folder. If I ask Maya for something, it's going to go to that folder to find it. Does that make sense? So this is how we stay organized. We set the project. Critically important to understand, though, setting the project and opening a file are two totally different things. First, we set the project. This is what I want to work on. Then I open a file. Hey, in that project folder, can I have this file or that file? Does that make sense? So you set it first, then you go to open. All right. Any questions on those two ideas? They're pretty straightforward. They're not too bad. Make sense? Yes, go ahead.
What if I open on something instead of
Well, if you just go to open, Maya's going to go, okay, what file do you want from over here? And it's going to choose a default location. So that's not necessarily the file you want. So then you got to go looking for it. And the problem is, and this is what you will notice starting day 2 right away, maybe even today, is if you've not set your project, the images that you need to build the projects don't populate. So now the information that Maya needs is not available, and Maya goes, well, I don't know where those pictures are, and then goes, then I'm not going to do anything. Because Maya is like a child. So what's going to happen is you're going to get really frustrated because Maya's not doing what you want, you're not able to do what you want to do, and then, then you're saying bad things behind Maya's back. Maya tells Maya's friends stuff about you, and before you know it, it's a vicious cycle, and then you guys are broken up and it's all over something silly. We will see. We will see. People love Blender because it's free, but there's a reason the industry is not using it. It's a good modeling application. In everything else, not so much. And that's why nobody else is using it. All right, so let's get back to this fun stuff. Let's talk about Maya's interface. Now, in terms of Maya's interface, there's a lot going on there, and it's kind of intimidating when you look at it at first. I will give you that. However, what we're going to do is break down the different areas of the interface, talk a little bit about what it does, and as we go into these different tools and skills, we'll get into finer and finer detail, and then we'll learn more about them as we go and as we need them. Kind of like when you're learning a language. We get over the important stuff first. Where's the bathroom? How much for beer? That kind of thing. And then we get into the really fancy, complicated stuff later on. So let's talk about the Maya interface, what everything is called, and just sort of learn the landscape because it is pretty complicated. All right. Let's see, where are you, Maya? There you are, you nut. All right. Right across the top here, we have what we call our main menu items. The main menu items are basically places where we house tools and actions. An example of a tool from our world would be like a screwdriver or a hammer. An example of an action would be like cut this thing in half, glue these things together. Does that make sense? All that stuff is in your main menu items. And the way you access them is you click on it with the left mouse button and it gives you a drop-down menu. And it lists all the tools and actions that are under that category. So you can go to whatever tool or whatever action you want. What you will notice is that to the right of these tools and actions, there are little boxes. These are the options boxes. And what happens is if there's a tool, oftentimes there's a way to change the way it works by clicking on the options box. And within that options box, again, there's settings that you can play with. You can reset the tool back to the way it was brand new if you happen to have changed any of those. And what's also nice is there's a little help icon in there that you can click on, a little button. And as long as you have an internet connection that works, it will launch Maya's help documents. And then you can look up any given tool and how it works. And it gives you little pictures and text that walk you through it, as well as fun related links that will take you over to other things that are correlated with this tool or this action. Does that make sense? So great way, again, to help sort of augment your notes by having additional information. And of course, you can search for something as well if you need to. So you can enter stuff in there and look stuff up. And again, these are all related things in here that you can click on and find your way around and through. So as long as you have an internet connection, that's pretty handy. All right. Now, this thing here, what we call the status line. The status line is basically how we explain to Maya what kind of job we're trying to do, because Maya does many, many jobs. And let's say, for example, Maya was an application that built houses, like in the real world houses. Do you use the same tools for shingling as you do for interior painting? No, those are totally different tools, right? We've got paintbrushes, drop cloths, that kind of thing for painting. We've got crowbars, we've got hammers and nails for putting shingles on, right? So what happens is we explain to Maya what job we're trying to do, shingling. And then Maya gives you all the tools and actions you need for shingling. That's how we organize Maya. It creates categories and groups for the various things that it can do. Does that make sense? So if you change your status line, for example, it's currently set for modeling. So I have modeling tools and actions. But if I change this to say animation, you'll notice my menu items change because now I have animation related tools. Does that make sense? So this is a means of organization. So make sure when you're looking for a menu item, if you can't find it, check your status line and make sure you've set it for whatever it is that sort of houses what you're looking for. We are a polygon modeling class primarily, and so we're going to be under modeling most of the time. So if you can't find what you're looking for, make sure you're set for modeling because that could be the issue. All right. Now, this area down here is called the shelf, and these are called shelf tabs. And what these shelf tabs do is take you to cute little buttons. And these little buttons are shortcuts to our main menu items. So for example, if you look up here at Edit Mesh, you will see that we have the extrude tool. Right? Now, if you look on your polygon tab, you will see I also have a button, and that button right there is the extrude tool. So the difference is rather than having to go to Edit Mesh and then get to extrude, you can just go over here to this button right there, a little bit faster. Does that make sense? Okay. And you'll notice that a little help balloon pops up and it tells you what the name of the tool is and a little bit about it. But what's really helpful is anything you put your cursor over, anywhere on Maya, Maya will actually tell you down here in what we call the help line, it will tell you what that thing is called and a little bit about how it works. And why that's important is if you know what something is called, you can actually look that up. Does that make sense? You can use the Google Help documents and find it. So even a tool we've never discussed, you can learn about it and figure out how to use it. Make sense? Okay. So the help line is very handy. All right. This area over here is called the toolbox. And the toolbox is kind of how we interact with our art. That's, as an artist, this is where we work. And the tools in there do all kinds of different things. This first tool here is the select tool. And this tool actually allows us to select things. And you know, sometimes we just want to select something. We're not actually doing something to it. I just need to select it to tell Maya this is something I want to do something with. So let's say, for example, I've got a polygon cube here and I want to select it. Using my select tool, I can then select it. And when it's selected, it lights up in this nice green color. And you'll notice that some information populates over here. Nothing is selected, nothing is over here. When I select this object, I get the name of the object, some information about where it is in space, and if there are any inputs associated with this object that I can manipulate if I want. This area over here is called the channel box. The icon for the channel box is this little icon way over here on the right. And you can also access it using these tabs. You'll see sometimes there's little tabs on the side that you can click on as well. But that's the icon for channel box. And channel box is basically information about the selected object. And that's why when nothing is selected, there's nothing in there. Make sense? Okay. So it's like you could walk up to somebody and touch their shoulder and get their name and where they're from and all that. You wouldn't even have to talk to them. We're almost there now, aren't we? Anyway, in terms of selection, that's how you would select something. We also have at our disposal the move tool. What do you think that does? Moves things, right? I'm not tricking you, right? So in terms of moving this object, what you'll notice is if I want to move it up, I grab this green arrow. Green is the y-axis. Green is always y is always green, and green is talking about up or down. So if I grab this green arrow with my left mouse button and move this cube, you'll see it moves up and down. Even if I move left and right, it really only wants to go up or down. And what you'll notice is that the numbers over here in the channel box, in the translate Y attribute, As I go up, they increase, right? As I go down, they get smaller until I go below the grid, they go negative. Because Maya is a giant Cartesian grid coordinate system. So when I'm moving objects, that's what's happening. And you might wonder, well, can I just enter a value here? Yeah, I can, absolutely. Just plug in a value. But odds are pretty good you're not going to be able to guess where something goes when it comes to translation. So you're probably just going to use the tools of manipulation to move it. So here I am moving in Y. Here I am moving in X, which is the red axis. X is always red, red is always X. X means side to side. Positive X, negative X. I can also move in the blue axis, Z, or depth, forward or back, positive, negative. The arrow always points to the positive direction. The other side is the negative side. Make sense? Okay. Incidentally, if I plug in the coordinates of all 0, where do you think it's going to go? To the origin, absolutely. Make sense? All those silly classes we took in high school, there it is in action. All right? Now, you might be thinking, wow, what a tedious process, man. I got to grab these arrows one at a time and move them. Blah. Well, the good news is you don't have to move everything like that. You can actually grab this light blue cube in the middle with your left mouse button, and you can wing this thing around anywhere you want to, really quickly. And what we do is we move it quickly like that, and then we use the arrows for precision in terms of placement. Make sense? Okay. So that is the move tool or movement within the workspace. Here's my rotate tool. Guess what that does? It rotates. It's also got color coordinated axes, right? What did we say blue was? Blue is Z. Blue is always Z. What did we say green was? Y. Red is X. And what we're doing here is rotating the object. And in terms of the values we're generating here, that's actually degrees. So you would know those values. I want to rotate something 90 degrees, 180 degrees. So that's pretty straightforward. You can do that. Again, all 0s would take it back to where it was at the origin. All right. Oh, and incidentally, this icon that I'm manipulating, you can use the plus or the minus key on your keyboard to change its size. That's a preference thing. Plus or minus. Yep. So it's in the upper right over by the delete key. So you can change the size of that. We also have the scale tool. Scale tool, big surprise, it's color coordinated too. Green is, what's green axis? Y. Red is X. And blue is Z. And scaling, what that does is it scales the object both positively and negatively in whatever axis you are manipulating. Right? And again, well, what if I don't want to stretch it in 2 directions at once? Well, that's where we get this cube in the middle, this light blue one. Drag with your left mouse button and you can increase or decrease the size of the object without changing its proportions. When the object is first created, it's on a scale of 1/1 scale or actual size. So if I wanted to make this cube 4 times bigger, I could highlight all 4 of those and plug in, or all 3 of those and plug in a 4. Now it's 4 times the size. Yes?
What if they want to modify, to change X and Y at the same time, but not Z?
Well, we've got all kinds of fun controls that are built into this. We didn't go into that yet, but if you take a look at these little color-coded boxes over here, that's where you would play with that. But there are better ways to model, and I will show you those, I promise. But could you do that? Absolutely. It is built into it. It's a good question. All right. So again, this is called the what over here? Toolbox. Very good. Maya is a language, and you should try to learn this language because you will be able to ask me questions and I know what you're talking about. And then when I answer you, you know what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? So do try to work that into your lexicon. All right, over here, we have the area called saved layouts. Saved layouts are basically talking about these window configurations. Now, this window here, or workspace, different names for it, this is the perspective window. It says persp at the bottom. This window has depth to it. It looks 3D, and that's what this window's job is. But there are other windows in Maya. So if I go to this icon, I've launched the perspective view. If I go to this icon, I launch what we call 4-view. 4-view has 3 orthographic views and 1 perspective view. These are 4 views of the same object, and I'll wiggle it so you can see. So what we're looking at is a perspective view of the object, a side view, a front view, and a top view. And the reason we have that is for precision placement. So let's say, for example, I have a sphere that I'd like to place right on top of this cube. Well, I can try to eyeball it in perspective, but odds are pretty good I'm not going to get it right on. But if I use my orthographic views, I can line it up here, and I can come over here and line it up there. And if it looks good here and here, I know it's good out here. Does that make sense? All the windows work together for precision. All right. Now, in terms of getting around these windows, you can go into any window you wish. Just like it's easier to draw on a big piece of paper, you want to work on a big window, not a little one. So all you have to do is put your cursor over whatever window you want to be in and hit spacebar. Now you're in that window. If you hit the spacebar again, you go out to 4-view, you put your cursor over a different window, you hit spacebar, now you're in that window. So you can jump around really fast and get to whatever window you need to be in. Make sense? Okay. Now, you probably noticed that I'm like moving around within these windows. And there's a lot more movement in perspective than there is in the orthographics. But in terms of perspective, what we're doing in this particular instance is tumbling. If you look at your keyboard, 2 keys to the left of the spacebar, you will see, or also to the right, you'll see the Option key. If you hold down the Option key and your left mouse button, you get the tumble function. Tumble allows you to look at an object from any angle, so you can examine it from anywhere. If you hold down that same Option key and hold down the middle mouse button, we get track or dolly. And this allows us to move alongside the object without getting any closer to it. So I can go up, down, left, right, but I'm not getting any nearer to it. Middle mouse button held down. Option in conjunction with the right mouse button gives us zoom in and zoom out. So I can zoom in or zoom out on an object. So through the course of modeling, we're going to tumble, zoom, track, dolly, and that's going to allow us to navigate around within the scene. Yes? If you go to an orthographic view, and these are orthographic, meaning flat, no depth, you can't tumble in here because there's no depth. That's not possible. You can track or dolly, and you can zoom. Does that make sense? That is a limitation of 2D by design, whereas this window is 3D, which allows tumble. All right? So that's what all those windows do, and that's how they work. Now, this area down here is called the timeline. This area is associated with animation, which sadly we will not be able to touch on in this class. But the way it works is like a flip book. Are you guys familiar with flip books? A series of pictures, there's a drawing on each one, and if you show them at the right rate of speed, due to a phenomenon called persistence of vision, we perceive animation, even though that's not really what's happening. Well, the way this works down here is each stop on this timeline is like a drawing. So when we're doing an animation, we do drawings, 24 of them give us 1 second of information visually, and we perceive animation in the timeline. Does that make sense? Okay. And these are the play controls for it. Play your animation forward, stop. Play the animation backwards, stop. Jump 1 keyframe back, jump 1 keyframe forward, 1 frame back, 1 frame forward. Go to the beginning, go to the end. It's just like a DVD player, so you can jump around to whatever you want to see. And that's what those do. Now, this area here is called Maya's layer editor, and we can actually create layers in Maya. How many of you guys have ever used Photoshop? Okay, a couple of you, that's good. If you've used Photoshop, you know, that's what makes Photoshop powerful, is its layers. The layers in Maya are not quite as powerful as the Photoshop related ones, but they do a lot of the same things in terms of creating layers where you can show stuff and hide stuff and lock stuff and template stuff so that it can't be messed with. All of those kind of functions take place over here. So this is really more of an organizational capacity than an art-driven one. Yes?
Sorry, what's that area photo?
This is the layer editor. Yep, layer editor. Yep, and at any time, if you want to ask me a question, say something again, I'm more than happy to do that. Because what I do periodically is I stop and I kind of take everybody's temperature, and if it's looking like we're getting it, we go to the next thing. So if you don't say anything, I might miss it. So let me know. I have no problem going over stuff again. All right. So again, that's what the layer editor is. And we talked about this area here. What's this thing called? Channel box is correct. Channel box houses information on the selected object. Nothing selected, no information in there. Make sense? All right, so that's a quick spin around Maya's interface. Obviously, we're going to get into more detail as we go, but if you know where things are, what they're called, and a little bit about what they do, we can start finding our way. All right. How are my digital friends doing, Brian?
Excellent.
Awesome.
Staying with it.
I love those guys. Never give up. All right, let's do a little bit of playing. Again, if you've got Maya. Oh, let me do this. How many of you downloaded the activity file folder from FSO? A couple of you? Okay. The activity file folder is a folder. Obviously, we put it on FSO. 3 guesses where it is. It's on FSO in the download section, right? It's a folder that contains the in-class activities, these little things that we do together to make sure you know what I'm talking about. So, you know, obviously before the next class, make sure you've got that downloaded and you know where it is, because we're going to be pulling that thing out every class and working on some stuff in it. Think of it like a workbook kind of thing. So make sure you've got that. Now, we don't have to have that for today. We can just play a little bit and see how it goes, but just realize that that's going to be our go-to for activities. So this is what I want you guys to do. I'm going to show you just the creation of some simple primitives and moving them around, and see if you can do the same thing. One thing to note, you'll notice that when I click on an object, it just appears, it magically is created. Your copy of Maya by default doesn't do that. You have to actually set up Maya to do that. And the way you do that is if you go to your Create menu set, under Polygon Primitives, what you'll notice is on mine, interactive creation is not checked on. Does that make sense? The box is empty. And what that means is when I click on a Polygon primitive, it just appears. By default, yours will be turned on, right? And what that means is when you go here to Polygon Primitives, you'll see it's checked on. And what it will ask you to do when you say, oh, I want a cube, it'll say, okay, draw how big it is on the floor. All right, so with the left mouse button, you drag and let go. And then it says, okay, now draw how tall it is. Okay. Now you have a cube. Does that make sense? 2 steps, and I never draw exactly what I want anyway. So what I do is I have my Create menu, Polygon Primitives. I uncheck this by clicking it with the left mouse button. And then all I have to do is click on something, boom, and it appears. And I have to manipulate it anyway. Make sense? Personal preference, you can do whatever you wish. So here I am with my cylinder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm just going to raise it up above the grid, and I'm going to rest it right on that grid line there, which represents the surface of the world that I'm building. It's basically this grid we see here, right? And then I'm going to create a sphere, and I'm going to drag that guy up, and I want to make sure it's placed right on top of the cylinder. Check this view, looks good. All right, and then I'm gonna make a cone, boop. Grab that thing, but, oh no, he's tricky. That's right, I'm gonna flip it over by using my rotate tool, and I'm gonna rotate it 180 degrees, and then using my move it tool, just put it right there in the top. And I just want to see how many of you can also do that. Just create those 3 simple polygon primitive shapes, and Brian will walk around with me and we'll both look and see what you're doing and how it goes. Like I said, in this class, we have little activities that we do that back up the stuff we talk about. You're starting to get a feel for how that works. As we progress, there'll be more activities to do. First day is more talking than doing, but we do try to balance that out as we go. All right, so you try it at home. Also, my digital friends, get your questions ready.
Barbara's done.
Barbara's done. What? All right. Oh, also as a personal suggestion, whenever you're working with Maya, I would recommend having a notebook and just write down questions that you have or problems that you're having. That way, when you are in class and you have access to all of us, you can go right through all your questions. You don't want to come to class and be, oh, shoot, you know, what was that thing I wanted to ask you I ran into yesterday? You know, it kind of gets frustrating. So make a little list of the things that you wonder about. Oh, good job. Very nice. Yes, looks good. Excellent. Yes.
I have a question that probably you will answer later. Like, I want to rotate that the edges, that the shape of the cone should be rotating at the same time with the shape of the circle.
Oh, yes, we will get into that. You will see. How we doing? Good? Oh, pardon me. Let me scoot behind you here. How you guys doing? Good? Awesome. No, it's totally fine. Like I said, the classes you had before this one did not prepare you for this one.
I got this stuff today.
Yeah. No, this is a whole other animal. But the good news is you've got a whole lab to get your feet on the ground before you come back on Friday. So make sure you got everything downloaded and you're ready to go, and you'll do terrific. Rotate tool. Yep, use your rotate tool and flip it over. You want to do this row? I'll go this way. Good. Like I said, you don't have to have Maya today, but it's always to your advantage. Good, good, good. Excellent. Looks like you guys are killing it. Nice. Yes.
I just downloaded Maya.
Yeah, that's Maya.
Yeah.
Right, but you need your serial number to activate it, but it looks like it's right. Well, they're gonna give you the serial.
Yeah.
They're gonna send it to your account on Autodesk. So you got to sign in there, and they'll send it to you. Usually it's right away. Sometimes you do have to wait a little bit.
I'm just downloading it from your website as a student.
Well, this is the same thing, but just make sure you use the one that we tell you to use, because it might not have all the accessories you need. Because we're going to be using things like Arnold to render and stuff like that. Okay, no worries. Yeah, the product key they're going to send you to your account at Autodesk. So once you've created it. If you go to FSO, to our class, you'll see there's a section called Downloads. And in the Download section, we give you links on how to get to Autodesk, the right place to download and install the version of Maya we want you to get. All right, guys. So it looks like you guys are doing pretty well. That's good. I'm very happy to see it. Again, no worries if you don't have Maya today, but we'll make sure we get that set up for next time. Yes. Yeah.
I tried to put my number, but I was afraid.
Yes. Are you able to use Maya though? See if it will work. Try that. Just make sure. All right. All right, here we go. All right. So more information to discuss, and I know it's always tough to like tear back away from Maya after we've started playing, but periodically we got to go into more information. So again, we got to let go of Maya, but remember that these little activities that we do in class are like going to practice for whatever sport you've played or going to lessons with whatever instrument you learned. You do these exercises with me, but you can go home and do these exercises again and again. And the more you do them, the better you're going to get. So if you feel like, shoot, that didn't go so great in lecture, hey, then work on it in lab, work on it in home. You're going to get better as long as you are persistent and you refuse to kind of hide from it. This is definitely a confrontalist approach. You've got to go after Maya because it's not going to magically get in there. You really do have to drag it down. All right, so let's talk a little bit about modeling. The 5 phases of modeling that we have for our class is the design and gather reference phase, and that's where we're either doing drawings of our own, or we're using photographs, or we're taking reference images of blueprints or that kind of thing in order to build the objects. We create what we call a blockout of the object. Then we go into the building of the object in logical parts. Then we go into the UV mapping process, which is where we prep our geometry for textures. And then we clean up and organize our files so that we can pass them on to the next person, whoever on our production pipeline doing whatever they do. And in the instance of our pipeline, it would be the texturing, shading process. That's how they come together in order. Reference, blockout, model, UV map, clean up. All right, so let's talk about the first one, reference. Reference is critically important because the better your reference is, the higher the quality, the more thorough it is, the faster and the better you can build whatever it is in that reference. So you always want to have the best possible reference that you can get. And again, it is a source of inspiration. You're excited about what it is you're going to make when you can see what it will look like when it's all done. Now, something I'd like you to start doing, even at this early stage, you will start to realize that modeling is a lot like drawing. Do we have any illustrators in here? You like to draw? Modeling is a lot like drawing in that when we are creating objects, we're trying to see the primitive shapes inside, and we start with those as the volumes that represent the things we're trying to build. So when you're looking at your reference images, try to see the simple primitive shapes inside, because the ideas are the same. If you're going to draw a telephone pole, you start by drawing a cylinder because that represents most of the volume and shape you need for that object. Modeling is the same way. If I'm going to model a telephone pole, I also start with a cylinder. So start putting those ideas together in your head now and start analyzing shape and form, because it really doesn't matter how complex the object is, organic or inorganic, everything can be broken down into simple primitive shapes. So we got to be able to see those first, because that's how we move into being able to model. Does that make sense how they're similar? Okay. Modeling and illustration, very similar. However, in modeling, we use polygon primitives. So again, we're looking for objects that already represent the bulk of the shape and form we need as we get started. So just like drawing, they do the same thing. And that's what we were just playing with, the cubes and the cylinders and the cones. All right, who can tell me, what is that? The Millennium Falcon, right? Anybody seen Solo yet? Oh, don't say a word. I haven't yet. I haven't yet. Who's this? No, Spider-Man. What about this? Cat. Absolutely. What we are looking at is commonly referred to as silhouette. It is a 2D concept. It represents the shape of whatever object it is. As a modeler, job one is hit silhouette. I should be able to look at the silhouette of whatever you've built and be able to tell instantly what it is. Does that make sense? Recognition. If I can't tell from its silhouette what you've made, you're already missing a big piece of the mark, which says, does it look right? Does that make sense? Silhouette is half of the equation. Does it look right? So we must hit silhouette in order to hit recognize an object for what it is. And so important is silhouette that you can actually pick out different species of dog and different species of tree even, just from its silhouette. There's no detail there, but I know which one it is. So silhouette is a very powerful tool. As a result, silhouette is something that we grade on. That is half of, does it look right? That 35%. So if this is the reference image you are given to model from, these two lamps are close enough to the reference image and would score all of the points associated with silhouette. These lamps are too different. They're not close enough. They will not earn the points for silhouette. Does that make sense? So does it look right? This is half the battle. Silhouette. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. The other half of that battle is form. Form is surface detail, depth-related detail, right? This is the 3D part of things. So if you have silhouette and you have form, it looks right. It is possible to hit silhouette and miss form. That happens. So in terms of your model, again, this is something we're grading on. If this is your reference image, these lamps are close enough to the reference image that they would score all of the points associated with form. These, too different, not similar enough. They do not get the points for form. Does that make sense? Both of those are, does it look right? But broken down into simple terms. All right. Now we have a skill check for this lecture, and I think you're gonna like it. It's gonna teach you how to use the Maya interface, move stuff around, manipulate in order to create an object. Now the good news is you don't have to model, you don't have to duplicate anything, you don't have to build anything. We're just gonna take the pieces that are already there and arrange them in such a way that they look like the objective at the end. Now, the skill check is called the Build Me exercise. Where do you think that is? FSO, somebody's got it down. So in terms of that Build Me exercise, we are going to be learning, again, interface and things related to that. Here we go. Now, I'm going to go to that activity or that skill check. So here I am at skill check number 1. And when you go to it, dun, dun, dun. No, why is that not? That should let me right in there, punk. There we go. I had to deactivate it. All right. So when you go to lecture 1 skill check, what you'll see is we've got some pictures for you to look at. This is what he should look like when he's all done, when you've built it properly. Again, reference image. So good idea to have your reference images on hand. So you just drag that to your desktop. And now you've got it. So this is what the end result should look like. All right. However, when you get it, it's going to look like where are you? You're not in there. There you go. Build me assignment. Oh, there's my references. Where's my model? Here he is. Here's what it'll look like when he's all done. All right. And this is what we call Captain Idaho. Arr. All right. You might recognize him by another copyrighted name, but we won't use that. But anyway, so we've got Captain Idaho, and we've got to build him. So what you're going to do is, again, you want to make sure you have the information you needed from lecture 1. And in terms of your skill checks, we have a folder for that as well. And big surprise, it's called the skill check folder, which you can download from guess where? From FSO. So when I want to build Captain Idaho, the first thing I have to do is set my project, right? Set my project to the skill check file folder. So again, just so you can see that, file, set project. So I click on that. Maya says, okay, what do you want to work on? Well, in my documents folder, I have a folder called 3DF, the year and the month that I took 3DF. And in that folder, I have an activity file folder, because that's our daily activities that we do together. And I have my skill check file folder. So this is with skill check items. So I'm going to select skill check files and hit set. And again, if you go right into skill check, you'll see, oh yeah, there's all the Maya files I'm used to seeing. There's the Mel file in there. But I don't set it to any of those. I set it to the outer one, skill check, set. So now that I've set my project, now I actually open it. File, open scene. And there right up at the top, build me. So I click on it and then hit open. Don't save this. It's okay. It's okay. Maya's going to ask you a lot. Is everything okay? Yes, everything is okay. Maya's a bit of a panic attack person. So here's Captain Idaho, and you can see not so good at the moment. But the good news is we have every piece we need. All I need to do is move stuff and possibly scale stuff and rotate stuff to rebuild Captain Idaho. And again, the objective is to make him look like this reference image. So you want to make sure when he's all done, he looks like that. Make sense? All right, let's take a look at a little bit of it to get you started. Again, every piece you select, you see its name in the channel box, right? That'll help you out tremendously. So if this is his body, right? And you look at this and you're like, wow, it's kind of big on the top and small on the bottom. But when I look at my reference image, it's kind of big on the bottom and small on the top. So what do I need to do? Turn it around, right? Flip it over. Rotate tool. Just flip that thing over 180 degrees. Boom. That's ready. All right. Next piece. Let's say I want to put his nose on, right? For my next thing. There's a billion pieces in here. Where am I going to find the nose? It's red. It's over there. Exactly. But if I don't know that for sure, if I go to Windows, you'll see that there's a special window called the Outliner. The Outliner is a great window because it lists everything that's in your scene. So you can either come over here and go nose and select it, and it will select it out here, or you can select the object and it will select it in there. All Windows and Maya work together. They're just showing you something different. So if I want to find a piece, I can use this list in the Outliner, Windows Outliner, and then I can find any piece I want. So if this is the nose, right, I want to move that, somewhere near his face. So I'm going to go to my front view here. I'm going to use my move tool. I'm going to bring it about to where his nose goes. Right, line it up there. Front view looks pretty good. Let's go to the side view. Here's my nose. Oh, that little peg should be facing inward because that's how you stick it into his face. So I'm going to turn that so it can actually go into his face a little bit. All right, so my nose is in place now, but does it look right? Let's look at my reference image. Look at that thing. That's a big tomato, right? That's not it. So what do I need to do? Scale it, right? So I go to my scale tool. Now here's a trick though. If I scale only in X, that's not right. If I scale only in Z, that's not right. I like the proportions overall, it's just too small. So what do I need to manipulate? the middle, that light blue cube, right? So I maintain the proportions. And again, I check it against my reference. Oh yeah, that's looking better. Does that make sense? Okay, so we size all the pieces and put them together. When it comes time to save it, we save our files. We go to, again, the file menu set, file, save scene as. Now, here's where it gets a tiny bit tricky. You will notice that the file we started with, the build me file, is an MA, Maya ASCII file. Maya files actually come in two varieties. Maya file, Maya ASCII, and Maya binary. It's like chocolate and vanilla. They're both ice cream. It's just what flavor do you want? This is Maya ASCII. So when I want to save my file, if the original is an ASCII, the saved one also has to be an ASCII. It won't let you change the file type. So if you're trying to save it, Maya goes, no, I can't do that. I can't. It's a different type. Somebody hold me. That's the problem. Does that make sense? So don't panic with Maya. Just realize that's what its issue is. So because this is an ASCII, when I go to save this, I'm going to save it. And right down here, it says file type. That's where I click this and I choose ASCII. And then it will save it as an MA. You can't just write the word MA at the end and it's going to work. Does that make sense? Any more than crossing out chocolate and writing vanilla on it's not going to change the ice cream in the container. So yeah, it doesn't work like that. Otherwise, they'd all be cookies and cream. Or chocolate, oh, cookie dough. Yeah. All right, so again, in terms of naming your file, again, save it as the same type because that's going to keep you out of hot water with the saving. But remember that everything we ask you to do in this class actually has a specific name we're looking for. So for example, let me go back over here. When I'm in my lecture 1 skill check, you'll see that we have a name. This is how we want you to name the files you give us. And literally, naming the file right is almost worth a full letter grade. So if you get this wrong, you're already at a B. And we haven't even gotten to look at what you're doing. Does that make sense? So make sure you're checking with each activity, how do I name things? Because this is the naming convention that the school uses. So every file you turn in for every class after this one will follow the same thing. Your last name underscore your first name. For our class specifically, we name things, the skill checks, lecture 1 skill check, lecture 2 skill check, whichever skill check it happens to be. Skill check, capital S, capital C, underscore, what class is it? 3DF, underscore, and then put in your month. And we are 1806. 2018 is the year, 1806. That's the month we're in. Does that make sense?
This is like for all future classes after this.
Every class after this one will use this same naming convention. It's just whatever class you're in, whatever month it is, and the assignment. That will change. But this is the convention, so just get it down. And like I said, I give you an example, so you can do it. The only reason you would get this wrong is if you're not paying attention. Does that make sense? This is a gimme. If you're going to lose points, lose it over the hard stuff, right? Not the easy things. So make sure you're looking at what we kind of call things because everything's got a name. Make sense? All right. So again, you'll upload this stuff to FSO, and the upload process we go into here. But what you'll end up doing is you'll make a folder, and then you'll save it into that folder. Let me just close all this stuff. I got a ton of stuff open. Make a folder. The folder is going to have the same name as the assignment. Last name, underscore, first name, underscore, whatever it is. Lecture 1 skill check in this instance, underscore 3DF, underscore 1806. And then you'll put your Maya file in that folder. And then with the right mouse button, you'll compress it. And what you'll end up with is a zipped up folder. And think of that like putting wrapping on a gift before you give it to somebody. And then this is what you are going to turn in. Where are you? Oh, there we go. This is what you're going to turn in the completion section. You just minimize all this stuff so it's not so confusing. You see we got this section called completion, and you just drag this to that, and that's what sends it to me and Brian. Make sense? Yep. All I need is the zipped file, and that will have the Maya file inside of that. Yep. So again, it's just like wrapping a gift. But like I said, we talk about that process, but that's how we upload files. So it's in there. You just got to read it. The instructions are there. I don't ask you to do anything I don't tell you how to do.
When it finally comes down to submitting our first file, like, will there just be a moment to go over how to do this, how to save it as a zip again, or is it just very simple?
Well, it's very simple to do, but you can always ask in lab. You know, I got to be honest with you. You guys have 6 hours with 2 people who love what they do, and they're super awesome. You guys are really going to like Marcus and Sarah. They're really funny. But in terms of asking questions, that is your best chance. You know, like Brian and I, we move around pretty quick. We do our best to try to help you, but if anything that's too complicated, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's going to have to wait till lab because we don't really have individual time. Does that make sense? If I just stop and help one person in here with a complicated thing, everyone else is like, oh, great. Now I'm being ignored. This is no fun. I hate this class. So we kind of have to keep moving in here. But the lab, every question you ever had, whatever problem you've got, you know, your hopes and dreams, whatever, that's the best time and best place to try to get a hold of somebody and really sit down and talk to them and get some solid feedback. And the smartest thing you could do is show those instructors what you're working on. Because this is one of the very few classes where you can go, hey, I'm thinking about turning this in. Did I forget anything? And we will look it over and go, no, yeah, oh, you forgot this. Don't forget that, because there's points associated with that. I mean, all that requires you to do is get your work done a tiny bit before it's actually due, and we can tell you what you need to do to get a better grade. I mean, that just doesn't happen in most classes. So take advantage of that. Work early, get feedback, and you can get a better grade. And, you know, this is a beginner's class. We know you guys are all new to this, and you're not going to be, you know, you're like, oh, shoot, that looks terrible. Yeah, it's okay. It's why you're here. If you were great, we wouldn't be talking. So come, learn, get feedback, and do better. That's what we're here for. You have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be scared of. We work with beginners every month, so it's not a big deal. And I chose Marcus and Sarah. I got lucky to end up with Brian, but because they're super patient, they're great with beginners. And we know where you're coming from. You know, you're excited, a little scared, because now this, you know, we're playing for real now. It's a lot of money, a lot of time. You invested your lives in a future using this place to get there. Scary, right? You want to make sure you get the most out of this place you can. Do it right. Make sure that investment was a good one for you. And that a big part of that is talking to your instructors, getting feedback on your work, and not being afraid. Criticism is a part of this line of work. You are going to be criticized. That's going to happen. We call it critique because if it's French, it's nicer. Although interesting, we chose French with that, right? But point being, having your work critiqued, getting feedback, and being told, well, this is good, but it needs to be better. You got to learn that. That's this field. You need a thicker skin. You got to get a little bit willing to take feedback and make adjustments accordingly, because that's the field that this is. Art for you do however you want. Art for hire, it's whatever they want, even if it's wrong. Make sense? Yeah, even if you don't like it, you might be embarrassed by it. I've seen projects where they're like, you know what, I'll do what you want. I will take your money. Do me a favor, don't tell anybody I did that for you. That happens, and I'm not joking. I was working on a project with ILM was working on something when I was in advertising. And ILM was like, look, I'll do what you want, but take our name off this project, would you? Don't tell anybody we did it, because this is embarrassing.
Josh Trank did Fantastic Four 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Or, no, I think Fox cut him.
Oh, yeah? It happens. It happens. But just realize you do what they want because they are paying the bills. And if you want them to come get you again and pay you again, you do what they want.
They're making all the wrong decisions.
Well, let me tell you, there are a lot of people in charge, and often when there are many chefs, and to be honest with you, politics is such a huge part of that. It can totally ruin things, you know, and that's why genuinely beautiful creative projects put together by teams of people is so rare. You know, like you look at the movie Tangled, that's gorgeous. That is a beautiful film. It was put together by amazingly talented people, and just that doesn't happen every day. And this is why you appreciate great projects.
I think that's my sister's favorite Disney animated.
It's amazing. I love it. That is a terrific film. One of my favorites.
She saw Frozen, but she and I did not understand the hype around it. Like,
Mhm.
I thought it was just boring.
Well, like I said, to everybody, everything has a different value. But like I said, great productions, that doesn't happen every day, you know, and every once in a while something magic happens, and that's when all the right people are allowed to do what they do. All right, so I've got to jump because I'm out of time here, but again, make sure you go through the FSO, go through all those activities and really do them. Don't just check them off as done. Do those activities, get yourself prepared, ask lots of questions in lab, get to know Marcus and Sarah, they're awesome. Work on these projects, get them done. If you have done absolutely everything, and I have a hard time believing you could get through all that, but if you did, start watching lecture 2, because that's what we're going to be talking about on Friday. And the more of a heads up you have, the better hooked up you're going to be when we get together on Friday. And that, believe me, it makes a difference when you know what's going on in advance. It's a huge help. Yes, I will activate it again before I go. Thank you for reminding me, but I'll make it so that you can get at it. All righty, so thank you very much, everybody. Great lecture today. We will do it again on Friday. Be prepared for more of the same. Bring a notebook and your sharpest pencil, because your notebook will never run out of power. And you can draw pictures. You can write on